Right, well, let's go ahead and get started. This is a fun workshop, I think. It's designing performance tasks, and I think performance tasks are a really fun way for kids to demonstrate what they've learned. And I've made them with kids or with teachers of students as early as kindergarten all the way on up. And this is the third in a series. So we talked a little bit about designing rubrics yesterday, and we will mention rubrics today, but there is a video from yesterday if you want to see more about the rubrics part. And if you didn't receive my email with the agenda, I put it in the chat. So you can download the agenda, and that would be just handy because it's going to have a lot of links on it that you can follow and you could use. Okay. So this webinar is part of a series made available through the Dell Texas Learning Network. So that means your district is a part of the Dell Texas Learning Network. And I'm a consultant with a group called Advanced Learning Partnerships. And we have been doing statewide collaboratives like this. I live in Virginia, and we have a learning network in Virginia that we've been running for the past over 2 years. And we're now working with Dell in Texas. And I've done a lot of work in Texas. I actually started my teaching career in Texas.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
We are recording, you know that. And you know how to use Zoom because you've already turned cameras on and muted and all that kind of stuff. Just a little bit about me. Like I said, I started teaching at Brazosport ISD down almost on the water. And I did go to Virginia and I got a degree in curriculum instruction and have been doing online learning since the late 90s. So it's been quite a while. So I've written some stuff about it and done some work on that. For 10 years, I worked in the Educational Research Lab, which was federally funded, but the last 10 years I've been working with Advanced Learning Partnerships. And I am the co-author of the only book that I know, the textbook that I know of about the ISTE standards for educators, which I know the Texas legislation just passed that new teachers should understand what those the ISTE standards are. So I'd like to know a little bit about you. You can just tell me, or you can put it in the chat, whatever you feel comfortable with. Oh wait, here comes Ron Davidson. Hi, Rob. Good morning. You just missed all the boring part. I just introduced myself and told people who I am. So we're to the point where it'd be nice if you and Vivian would tell me who you are and what you do. I know she teaches second grade, but I don't know where. And then what we could do today to make this really successful. And you can do that in the chat, or if you want to unmute, you could do it with your microphone. And a sip of coffee while you guys are thinking. Morning, Rob. Vivian's got students, so she may not be able to interact all the time.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Vivian Salisbury, and my role is a teacher. I'm a second grade teacher at Nova. What would make this webinar a success is for me to learn all what I can learn to integrate it in with my students to help me more, to become more proficient.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Good. I hope we do that today. I've got some tips to make that easier for you to do.
Okay, okay. I have my video off, is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay, okay.
And then Rob, do you want to share either microphone or in the chat? Great. What do you teach, Rob? Oh, and Vivian, I was going to ask what school district you're in.
Nova Academy.
Oh, okay.
Dallas.
I'm working with Grapevine Colleyville, and I've worked with a lot of schools near Fort Worth. Oh, audio video. Oh, this is perfect for you. Well, Rob, you probably do a lot of performance tasks already. So hopefully you'll learn some tips on making them a little bit easier to implement. So let's go ahead and get started. So I realize you were both probably in school setting, so just collaborate as much as you can. And let's just go ahead and get started. So I wanted to share with you this one task. It's a video. It's gonna have to go over here and make sure it comes up and loads. So it's linked on the agenda, so you can get to it there if you'd like to see it on your own. The thing about the link on the agenda is not only does it have the video, but it has the documents that we set out for all the kids. And my internet is being really slow. I pulled all these up early so it would load, and it's going to reload again. So if you go to the agenda, and Rob, I'll make sure you have the agenda in the chat. You'll find a link to this, and you'll see we have the video, but we also gave the kids some documents. Now, this was an 8th grade task, and we had some kids who struggled with language, so we also created some of the documents at a 6th grade reading level. But we're going to watch this video. It might be a little loud at the beginning, but then it calms down. So here goes. Oh, wait, let's watch it on. This way we go full screen. Okay, that's taking too long. Let's just go ahead and go back to this. I apologize. My internet is going very slow this morning. Okay, there she is.
Even at school, there are some teachers who let students learn with cell phones this issue is coming to a close next week when the board makes up their mind, they either vote to keep the current policy where all cell phones are off and stored on campus, or will allow students to use cell phones responsibly during the school day. This is where you come in. The school board is looking for student input on the issue. You can be the student that represents all of the Rainbow County. We collected information about both sides of this issue. You'll find it all here on the website. You have to review it and using what you find on the site, make a decision about where you stand on this issue. Should the current cell phone policy stay in place? Or should students be allowed to use their cell phones during school? You have to pick the side and use evidence from the information on this site to support your position. We also want you to think about the best way to present your position to the school board. How would you do that to help the school board make the best decision? Everything you need to make your decision and justify your viewpoint for this is on this website. For any other questions, please feel free to ask your teacher. And good luck.
All right, so I have a few questions. As Rob could probably tell us, that was not going to win an Oscar. We just put that together very quickly. So we don't, in terms of designing these things, we don't spend a whole lot of time. The idea is to get the message across. This is probably the most elaborate performance task we've done in terms of actually having like this big long video. But we did have 4 teachers who were working with us, and we convinced this, she was a tech coach. We convinced her to stand behind the green or in front of the green screen and to read that script for us. So I'm curious, as you look through that, what are some of the things you note about it as an assessment? And use the chat or speak up. And I see Lynn's joined us this morning. Good morning, Lynn.
Good morning. I got distracted and realized time passed.
That's okay. I'm glad you could join us. So any thoughts as an assessment? What do you think?
Well, I'm sorry, but the technology part on my end, I couldn't really understand it. It was lagging, so.
Oh,
but I was trying. I was really trying, but.
Okay, so besides the video, so what she's done is she's introduced this problem. They have to convince the school board whether students should be able to have cell phones or not have cell phones. And then we gave some data. There were the 2 board members. So one was for cell phones, and she gave data of why she thought they were important. And then one was against cell phones and gave data as to why. He had the chart, the table. And then we have this document library with all this different kinds of stuff. We have an email. We have 2 research articles. We actually have that chart that showed up on screen. That's down here. So as you're thinking about that, as you're thinking about, we have something coming in. Real quick. So let me ask, what kinds of things were we trying to assess with that? What is this assessment about?
Basically, how useful the cell phones would be in the classroom, especially in the upper grades. There could be pros and cons to that.
There are, yeah.
Yeah, pros and cons. Maybe a pro could be if it's going to be useful in the classroom, if they're used for technology-wise. Like if they're using for technology. That would be the only way that I can see the use of using a cell phone. If the instructor would say, guys, take your cell phone out, go to the internet, to Google, and let's Google and try to find a certain type of article or something. That would be the only way that could be used, that I can see.
So Paula's joined us. Paula, we're looking at an example of a task in which kids were asked to pick a side, either for cell phones or against cell phones, and convince their school board of their position. So the school board was going to decide whether they should or shouldn't use cell phones. So we're just talking about whether, what are the types of things that we think we're trying to assess with this performance task right now. And then we'll talk about the features in just a second. So besides the video, Paula, there were also documents. Let me see if I can pull some of these up really quick. So we did have a research article from Virginia Tech. The kids are Henrico County is in Virginia, so they would all know where Virginia Tech is. And this particular research, and it's very short, so it's about it is about the 8th grade reading level. So that one says that cell phones do not contribute to learning, but we also gave them this little research brief that said that how cell phones can contribute to learning. And Paula, in case you don't have the agenda, I'm going to send that to you right now in the chat. So let's talk a little bit about the structure. So this one actually does a really good job of showing the structure of what a performance task does. And so as we're moving forward and have lots of examples, I'm not going to go through all of them today. I have a couple we'll go through today. But as you're thinking about a performance task, it's a way for kids to demonstrate that they have transferred their learning to a new setting. And if you were here yesterday, I know Lynn was here. We talked about the goal of learning is to be able to transfer your learning to a novel setting. So that's what a performance task does. We try to make the performance task in as real world context as possible so that it's something the kids can relate to. So all the kids certainly could relate to the cell phone debate, obviously. They may or may not know who a school board is, but by the 8th grade, I would hope they would. This particular task and most of the tasks we develop, they don't have to be kept secret. If you have a multiple choice unit test or end of course test, you have to keep those questions secure. But with this kind of task, with a performance task, it doesn't matter. If the kids know what the task is and they actually practice on it to get better at the test, then that's actually a benefit. And it should ask kids to do something. So the things that we asked them to do, I worked with 4 teachers. One was an English teacher, math, science, social studies. So they each asked me to, they each included some standards that had to be addressed, like the learning from the research piece was nonfiction, plus we also had the little cartoon in there. So that was a request from language arts. The math teacher said her kids struggle with tables and charts. So we had tables and charts in there, and on and on and on. And so when they go through this task, and this task took 2 class periods, they were 8th grade students. They were in a block. I think they were in a block. They did it on Thursday and Friday. So it took 2 class periods. And the first day they went through all the materials, and then they told their teacher what their position was going to be the next day. And then the next day they put together whatever product they were going to put together. The range of products was interesting. Some kids wrote letters because they knew school board people were older people, and they said old people read letters. I'm not sure about the logic there, but that was their logic. We had kids, of course, who created PowerPoint presentations. There were kids who, one kid took out his cell phone that he wasn't supposed to have in school, and he created 3 videos of how you could use the cell phone appropriately and put them into a presentation. That was pretty interesting. And we just had a wide range of things. So at the end of the day, if we're going to score this, what are we going to grade? What do you think? Maybe in the chat. What do you think are some of the things we tried to grade?
You speaking as far as the students work?
Yeah, so when the students...
How well they put it together? Or?
Right, so how well they made an argument, how well they communicated that argument, that was one.
Okay.
What else? You were going to say something.
Quality of the presentation.
The quality of the presentation we actually didn't grade. Isn't that interesting? Because we did it in a math class, in a science class, in a social studies class, and English class. So they didn't actually teach the presentation, and we told the kids they could make any kind of product they wanted to. So there's different levels of quality we did evaluate. So if you go to the site, there is a rubric there. We wanted to see how well they solved the problem and were critical thinkers. And all of those teachers had taught their kids how to think critically in their content area and how to use evidence. So that was one. We wanted to know how well they used research information. So we gave them the information. They wanted to know, did they actually use that or did they use their opinion? And it turned out, unfortunately, many of them just used their opinion and didn't use the research we provided. So that was a lesson to us. Like Vivian said, how well we communicated that, how well the students communicate that. So some kids wrote something by hand that obviously did not communicate super well to the school board, but some kids created a presentation, like I said, with videos embedded that was really a great vehicle for communicating to the school board. Lynn?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
When I graded, when I've got them and I want them to use the research, I put in a penalty if they use just their opinion and don't touch the research, because you can, and I said, I expect to see components of this document in there.
Yeah.
Something specific that they have to draw on and explain from or analyze from this document, and not just their opinion.
Right. And so if you're familiar with DBQs, that's a very familiar structure for using documents for doing that. And those count as performance tests as well. And in our rubric, it would have said, at the beginning of the rubric, it says uses only opinion, and that's the lowest rating. And that's, so then that didn't qualify. Sorry, we've spent a lot of time on this one. It's just a really good example. We talked all week long about the 3 different types of assessments and a balanced assessment, doing a pre-assessment, doing formative assessment strategies while you're teaching. But this would be considered a cornerstone assessment. So Lynn was here on Tuesday. We talked about, you look at your standards, which are your TEKS, and then from that you come up with essential questions about why your TEKS are important. And then using understanding by design, Grant Wiggins and Jamie McTighe suggest that you design your assessment first. And so that would have been the assessment for that unit. So we're all kind of familiar with this version of Bloom's, and the TEKS are actually the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. So those are kind of the lower, the foundational skills, the foundational information that we need in every content area. It's not bad that they're foundational. I mean, we need to know that stuff. But if you're going to design a performance task, you really want to focus on those things that are the higher level. And you have standards, even in 2nd grade, Vivian, you have standards where kids have to analyze and evaluate information and to create something new. So that's where you want to start. If you try and design tasks around the remembering and understanding part, it can be very frustrating because a lot of that, like I said, is just foundational information, and it's hard sometimes to relate that to the real world. You can, in some cases, but it's much easier to analyze and evaluate a real world situation and then create something. The idea that Grant Wiggins and Jamie McTighe say you should create essential questions first, and then you design your tasks around the questions. That was really groundbreaking for me. It really helped me to focus the tasks that I created. So instead of getting, because you can get lost in the standards, it's really easy to go through the standards you have to teach and you get lost on the words, the verbs, and all that kind of stuff. But if you step back and you look at a group of standards and you think about, why is this really important for kids? And you start coming up with essential questions, then it's a lot easier to design a task. So that's the first step we do, is we look at the standards and we come up with essential questions. You're not going to do performance tasks every day, probably not even every week, maybe once a unit. You can, as I said, you can get them down into a day, a class period or 2 class periods, but sometimes they do take longer. So you want to make sure you have really high order standards, and you want to use multiple standards to come up with your essential questions. So as we look at these, some of these things, the essential questions are really for the kids, to get the kids interested in this. And the essential questions may not even have an answer. There's a lot of questions that are still unanswered that are intriguing to us in lots of different content areas. So these are just some examples. I see some of the non-examples in classes a lot. You know, how do you determine the main idea? I see that presented as an essential question a lot. That's actually an essential skill. So in the TEKS, T-E-K-S, it's the S part. But taking that idea of, you have to determine the main idea of a video, of an author, of a political group, of some kind of message. An essential question could be, what's the best way to get your point across? And notice how I kind of also shifted the language to what can you do to get that across. So these are some examples. So instead of what countries is Spanish the primary language, we would ask, how does language both define and defy cultures? And then that makes it much easier to design a task in which you identify which countries speak Spanish. It's just an identification task. It's not a performance task. So some of these we actually used. This one, the what is our place in the universe? I designed an online class for freshmen, ninth graders, for our virtual high school in Virginia. And that was our guiding question throughout the whole class. What is our place in the universe? So every unit in that had open-ended questions like that. So that's my first two tips. If you're going to do performance tasks, start with really high order standards and then come up with these essential questions. Wiggins and McTighe also describe the difference between exercises and problems. So we need to do them both. It's not that exercises are bad and problems are good. They're both good. We need to do them both. So I was a musician, so my exercises were I practiced rhythms with a metronome, and I practiced scales, and I practiced different fingering things, and I practiced articulation. So we need to know all those things, those foundational skills first, but we do those through exercises. Yesterday we looked at basketball. And the exercises for basketball would be dribble the ball, 100 times, or dribble the ball around the court without walking, or pass the ball to somebody else with the correct form. Those are exercises, and you can do those right, or you can do those incorrect. But a problem is much more complex, and even younger kids can do this. So we did I don't know if it was I think it was a second grade task, Vivian, in Crowley ISD, where kids learn about the parts of the government in their area, like the mayor's office and the libraries. And so the kids designed a welcome package to new people moving into the area, where they would take a map and they would highlight things and they would say, this is what you could find at this place. So, and I think they had to create the map. So the kids could create the map in different ways. And so even younger kids can do these complex problems that are still developmentally appropriate. In all these performance tasks, there could be multiple correct answers, and some answers can be better than others. So what you're really working on is you're using your rubric to see how well the kids have gotten at least to the point of transfer, and maybe even done some reflection and shown how they've grown. So if you have a task that has only one correct answer, it's not a performance task, but you could make it one if you think a little bit broader about those essential questions. All right, here's another handy tip, also from Wiggins and McTighe. They have developed this little mnemonic on how to structure a performance task. So if you think about this GRASPS idea and the cell phone task, the goal the kids had in the cell phone was to convince the school board either to vote for phones or against phones. And then the role that the kids play was they were themselves. They were themselves as students in the district, and the school board oversees the schools and the students in the district, so they were themselves. The audience, of course, was the school board. It was very relevant because it was their school board. It wasn't some big thing that they have no control over. The situation, of course, was all that stuff about here's information about the phones and not for phones. And then the product, we didn't tell them what the product was. They all had laptops. So we said, if you can do it on your laptop, then that counts as a product. So some kids wrote documents, and some kids created presentations, and some did movies, and one kid actually, wrote out something by hand. So because we were not assessing the product in terms of, we weren't assessing what product they used, they could have used anything. But now, if I have a kid who's learning the clarinet and they're doing a performance task to show me they have to play the clarinet, then the product has to do something with the clarinet, right? So sometimes there are limitations. So like Rob does audio and video. So he may have specific techniques or devices in the audio and video that he wants his kids to demonstrate to him. So he could wrap that into the product. And then the standards for success are a rubric. And we talked in great deal yesterday about the rubrics. So here's another helpful tip. sometimes people will will do a performance task and they won't give the kids any information. But I think both Vivian and Lynn had said that, you know, you give them some information to go through or something to analyze. If you give the kids the information, you can do it much faster. And you don't often have to give them a lot of information. In language arts class, a lot of kids will read books throughout a unit, and then those books become the information that the kids can refer to. If you don't, go ahead, Lynn.
You can expand it and give them a variety of information. So you can give like 3 different websites or 3 different documents, and they can choose which one. That's why you're still giving them the choice and the power there.
Right. And we actually also, I learned this from a group called CLA in the Classroom, and they design performance tasks for, I would say, seniors in high school and juniors in college, or the other way around, about workforce readiness. And they give you these specific ideas that they suggest you do give them multiple documents, but that the documents represent both sides. And they should be kind of evenly presented so that you're not suggesting one right answer over another. So I thought that was really interesting. So when you look through our documents, you'll see there's documents from parents, there's documents from researchers, there's documents from the school. So there's a wide range of things. If you don't give kids a document library and you say, go find it on the internet, it becomes an internet search task. And they spend all this time going over the internet, sometimes getting lost, sometimes getting bored. And so if you can provide them with the documents ahead of time, you can actually then administer the performance task much quicker. And documents don't have to be just documents. So web page counts, a video counts, a podcast counts, you know, any kind of way to share information that could be a document. All right, so I wanted to look at a couple, give you some examples. And if we have time, we're going to try and rough one out. This is going to go very quickly. So on the agenda, I have links to several libraries of performance tasks. One is one that I've done, and some of them are with teachers in Texas. There's also a link to some performance tasks we did specifically in Clear Creek, because I was there for a couple of years and we did a lot of tasks there. But some of these are from all over the country. And this is the first one I'm going to share. This is a 3rd grade task, so it's close, Vivian, to 2nd grade. It's not quite 2nd grade. I do remember there's a 2nd grade task we did around trick-or-treating, and the kids reviewed different information, and they wrote a letter to their parents whether they should or should not go trick-or-treating, and if they did, what would make them safe if they did that. So in this one, kids learn about habitat in Virginia in the 3rd grade, and these are the 3 animals that they study around habitat. Because they're native to Virginia and they're coming back to Virginia. We gave them information about it, even though they had already studied it. So they had their science book. They could use their science book if they want. And what they had to do was they lived in the city where the Virginia Museum of Natural History is. So they are all very familiar with the Virginia Museum of Natural History. They would go there on field trips. So this was very common to them, or very well known to them. And what we asked them to do is like design a habitat for one of these animals so that we could have them at the Virginia Museum of Natural History. These pictures are actually PowerPoint slides or PowerPoint files, and it has one slide and it has this picture on it. So what the kids would do is they would pick their animal first, they would open up their PowerPoint, which one they thought was the best one, and then down here they could copy and paste different kinds of things into their habitat if they thought that their animal needed it. I did do a little copy and paste tutorial, but the 3rd graders knew how to do it by the time we got to this task. So they put their little habitat together, and then in the notes, they would describe why they chose different things. Why did you choose the forest habitat for the bear? Why did you put in a cave for the bear? And they had to use the right appropriate the academic language. We had some kids who couldn't type, so they instead wrote it out by hand. And we had one little kiddo who just really struggled with that, so he explained it to his teacher. And the reason that we felt that was okay was because we were assessing their science knowledge and skills. We weren't necessarily assessing their written language, even though it's an important skill. But not being able to write doesn't mean that you don't know the science. So having the student explain it verbally was an acceptable way for them to share. And that student understood habitats and actually used the right language and hibernation and all that kind of stuff. So that's one, that's an example. That one lasted 40 minutes. We thought we were going to take an hour, and the kids, they're third graders, they were done in like 40 minutes. So that didn't take very long at all. This is another one. This is a 5th grade task. And this is basically the task, this chart or this diagram. At the time, their cafeteria had switched to what they were calling brown bread, but it was actually whole wheat bread. They had gotten rid of white bread, and they were now making sandwiches out of whole wheat bread, and the kids didn't like that. So we analyzed standards, and the essential questions are, how can we use our knowledge about decimals and fractions to solve problems? How can we convince people of our position? So they had to create a sandwich using guidelines from the federal government for lunches, and it had to fit into these parameters. It's not scrolling. Come on, scroll for me. Oh, there it goes. There we go. So this was the whole task, really. They had to create a sandwich. The lunch could be no more than 650 calories. It could be saturated fat was the fraction part, because they in the 5th grade they understand fractions and had to demonstrate a mastery of fractions. And the decimal part was the cost. And so they had to create something to convince the principal. And he actually came down, and there were kids who wrote songs, but they still had to have the math. There were kids who did posters, they just drew them, so they didn't have to use technology. They had kids who, some would do little videos like in a commercial or something. So it was a wide range of products. And in order for them to give them a chance to figure it all out, our document library were these ingredients. Because there was no way they were going to go out and figure all that stuff out. We told it was 4 5th grade teachers, and one of the 5th grade teachers wasn't there that day. She had a sub who had been a kindergarten teacher in the school, and we told all the teachers it should take about 90 minutes to do this task. Well, the kindergarten teacher, she went through, and the kids finished up in 90 minutes, and they did all of it, and they created their products, and it was all fine. And the other teachers they had never done one of these before, so this is kind of if you're going to work with teachers on this, they were afraid to let the kids go. They were afraid to let the kids work on this on their own. So the math teacher went through, and they solved all the math together as a class, which of course is not a performance assessment because the teacher did all the work, right? The English teacher put her class all in a circle, and she made them all read through everything together, and she asked them questions to comprehend. That's not an assessment either. That's the teacher. I mean, that's a lesson approach. But when we were all was said and done, the 3 teachers who were there normally, they took about 3 hours to do the task, whereas the kindergarten teacher did it in 90 minutes or less. And there was no difference in quality between the products from different classes. We just took all the products together, brought them to the office. The principal and the assistant principal sat down and pulled out 10, the top 10 that they thought did the best job of convincing them to make a new kind of sandwich. And of those 10, I believe 2 kids were English language learners who had rarely participated ever, but they were very passionate about what they wanted in their sandwich. And the other was a kid with an IEP who struggled to write, but was able to draw and convince the principal to make his sandwich. So it gave kids who might have some struggles in terms of language or cognitive ability to actually demonstrate the standards they need to demonstrate. So that was pretty cool. Because we have, let's see, some older teachers of older students as well. I'm just going to show you this one more. This one's been pretty popular, and I've seen it replicated many different times. All these tests that are on my website, you can use, you can adapt them, you can adopt them, whatever. It's nice if you say where you got it from. But I designed it first for a group of 8th graders, and I've seen it adapted in different, like I had an algebra teacher, so that would be mixed, maybe like 9th, 10th grade, 8th through 10th grade students who put in algebra standards to focus on this. But in this particular task, you can see the grasp mnemonic on the side, the goal, role, audience, situation. And this one, kids had to convince their parents that they should or should not go to college and why. I mean, very real world. We think all kids want to, we try to push all kids to college, but not all kids want to go to college or need to go to college because they might be able to, become network engineers and become certified right out of high school. So there are some options on careers. We weren't saying college was good or college was bad. We just said, you need to figure out if it's right for you and convince your parents whether you should attend. So that's the audience, the real world audience. And of course, we gave them documents on both sides for and against the idea of going to college. So very quickly, we're not going to have time to do one together, unfortunately. I really wanted to try and do it, but in 45 minutes, it's too much. But as you're moving forward, just remember some of the tips that I suggested. So the one is you want to design it at the unit level. You want to design it around essential questions, not individual standards. And the essential questions should be at the higher level standards. Try to avoid identification tasks or recall tasks because they're very difficult to turn into a performance task. And then just remember the goal, role, audience, situation, and product. And the success criteria is a rubric. So I'm going to ask, because we only have 2 minutes left, any questions, any comments? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to get you out of here on time. On the agenda, like I said, you will find links to all this information to different performance task banks. And that's maybe the easiest way to start, is to go to find one that somebody else has created and use it, or take it back and adopt it to your kids. And there is a survey that's linked on the agenda. If you would take that at some time today, that would be helpful. And if not, this is the URL right there. I do need to remind you that there are other classes that are being offered throughout the summer. If you want to find something else in different areas, and you already probably registered for this here, so you probably know where that is. So coming up on 10:45, sorry, it's a lot of information in 45 minutes. I usually do this in a full day, and we create them. And they're just a lot of fun. And I'll leave you with one story in less than a minute. When the teachers that did the sandwich task, they continue to make them throughout the year. And the last task, they did 4 that year. And the last one, the kids took their regular state tests, like your STAR test. They took the reading on one day, they took the math on the next day, and they did a performance task on the third day. And one of the teachers told me that her students said they thought they were being rewarded because they did so well on the other things, that they got to do a fun task on the third day. So hopefully all of your kids will have some fun tasks that they can do in the future. All right, thank you very much. I'm gonna turn off this video so I can make sure it gets recorded, and I hope the rest of your day is fantastic.